Hi there, my name's Ben, and today we're going to unpack another question. This one came to me when I was in the shower today, and it's something that I've been mulling over for the past little bit, and that is, can thought exist without language? Now, the esteemed philosopher Bertrand Russell, the third Earl Russell, I may add, he has a wonderful quote which is attributed to him, which is, "The role of language is to make possible thoughts which could not exist without it." Now, I think this is a fantastically wonderful quote. It's one of those ones that, works equally well in an intellectual capacity as well as it does on, one of those cheesy boards that you see at chapters or whatever. But let's unpack it further. That can thought exist without language? So firstly, we have to define thought and thinking, and we also have to define language. So Google defines thinking as the process of using one's mind to consider or reason about something. Okay? Like all definitions, still pretty big. Now let's define language. So language is defined by Google, of course, as the principal method of human communication consisting of words used in a structured and conventional way and conveyed by speech, writing, or gesture. Okay, it's a little bit more precise in the definition. I like to think of language as the link that bridges two minds together. Idea transfer cannot happen without some form of a language. It's the oldest form of data transfer that we have. It's also the only one that we can employ with a reasonable, I shouldn't even say a reasonable, because of course the accuracy of the translation of my thought is not always going to be 100%. The problem with that is the problem of perception, because everybody has their own unique perspective. Let's say if I were to communicate to, let's say my sister, for example, one of my thoughts, even though we're speaking in a language that both of us can understand, she may not get my meaning exactly as I intended it. And again, that's the problem of perception, ultimately. So I think another good question to ask is, does language inform our perception of the world? And I think it absolutely does. Because again, as I mentioned, it is the only method that we have of idea transfer. Now, this can also lead to another question. This is sort of where my tangential thinking goes. Do you think differently in different languages? Now, I speak a couple of different languages. I speak English and French, a bit of Spanish. It's not as good. I used to be able to speak some solid German, but it's terrible now. But are you able to think differently in different languages? And the answer is a resounding yes. I mean, just for example, in Japanese, they have basic terms for the color blue, whereas they actually have basic terms to distinguish between light blue and dark blue, whereas in English, our basic term for the color is just blue, right? And you'll often notice, those of you who are watching and who do speak a different language, you have a tendency to formulate your sentences differently. That's probably due to the grammar, but all of this sort of spirals into, okay, you end up thinking differently. You end up thinking in a different way. Maybe your ideas are still the same, but the process of you formulating that idea and coming to it and actually expressing your opinion is a lot more different. Now, again, another question that we have to get into: does this imply an inner monologue? Yes, I think it does imply an inner monologue if we are thinking in words and if we are thinking differently in different languages. However, the next question to that is, Does everybody have an inner monologue? Surprisingly, no, not everyone does. Language can help with the thought process, but it is not an essential requirement for it. Now, I was doing a little bit of reading before I was making this video, so I'll put the sources that I have, a couple of websites that I read. It's something very, very rudimentary, because I wanted to strike while the iron was hot and keep it fresh in my mind. But it doesn't necessarily mean, like, by not having an inner monologue, you're still thinking. You're just thinking in a different way, which means that we have answered our question: can thought exist without language? And the answer is, of course it can. Thoughts can exist without language. However, they cannot be transferred as easily without it. So we still need language in order to transfer that thought in order to another person. Now, again, going back to the definition of language, it doesn't necessarily have to be speech. It can be writing, it can be gestures. Language can be something that, two parties understand. Both of them understand. So it could be, and a wonderful example of this is, of course, American Sign Language. I believe so, the twins, they actually create their own languages and they communicate to each other in their own little way because both of them can understand it. And it's, and again, it doesn't have to be verbal. It can be gestured. It can be your own alphabet that you write, and so on and so forth. So now that we've answered that question, can thought exist without language? Which is yes, of course it can. I think a better question to ask would be, how can we transfer thought without language? Or better yet, how can we optimize language to ensure the least amount of data corruption during thought transfer? Now, I don't have the answers for these two questions, but I think we'll end it there, so then that way we can give this a little bit, more. One, we can perhaps make a couple of other videos on it, but two, I think that these are great questions that you can sort of just go out and ask if you're at a party and there's a lull in conversation, or if you want to have a deep thought for the supper table, or something like that, or if you want to, go to the philosophy seminar and flex on somebody. But I think they are important questions to be asked. So the two main ones I would say that we should ask are, how can we transfer thought without language? And the second one is, how can we optimize language to ensure the least amount of data corruption during thought transfer? So, if you have the answers to those questions, or you want to take a crack at it, feel free to comment down below. I would love to hear your answers to it. Let's see if we can't spark a little cool conversation with it. And thank you so much for watching.